In 2025, we are expected to take approximately, get this, 2.1 trillion photos. What does that do to the environment, our mental health, and the societies we live in?
Hi, welcome to the DIY Photo Organising podcast, focusing on topics to help you with your photo management. I'm Fiona from Counselling Memories.
And I'm Chantal from Photos in Order. Hello, Fiona.
Hi.
Today, we will talk about maintaining a photo hub through the lens of sustainability. We will discuss some interesting facts relating to taking photos and how that might actually shape things like the environment, but also your mental health and the society we live in. So, then we will also go through some things you might like to think about regarding your photos. So, this is with the intention not to be all doom and gloom, but to actually invite you to think about things possibly in a way that you haven't thought about yet. Okay, so shall we start with the dry fact, should we?
Yes, unfortunately, I think we should.
Unfortunately.
Um, and it can be, a little bit overwhelming to hear some of these figures and things like that, and see the part that we play in the our contribution. But I think it's really important to have some awareness around these things. And when we talk about sustainability, we're looking at what things can we do to help our current generation and our future generation. And so this is where knowing and understanding what taking photos contributes to that, I think is really important. So
Hmm.
in 2025, there's a lot of statistics out there, but this is one of them, and there's a range, but this is definitely one that is available for understanding that, humanity, we will take approximately 2.1 trillion photos in the year 2025. So this isn't, we will have that many photos, that's how many we will take in the year 2025. So globally, that's looking at capturing 5.3 billion photos a day, which is around 61,000 photos per second. So trying to wrap our head around that, that's a lot. That's a lot of photos. And it's understandable. We all have a photo, a phone in our hands, and some have more different devices, some don't have the privilege of having phones. We understand the range, and so this is really, across the board. So it's a lot, Chantal. I don't know. I mean, that's just, it's overwhelming, yeah?
Very overwhelming. It's like, yeah, you can't wrap your head around that. It's just too much.
Mm.
So, it's probably safe to say that we take a lot, and most of us probably take too many photos.
All precious though, all precious
Yeah,
photos.
yeah. So in that statistic, we also saw that they came out with the number of the Americans taking 20 photos a day on average, which would add up to about 7,300 photos a year. So I thought about what do I see pretty much on a daily basis with my clients at what have they got, and I've got a few years under my belt now, and the numbers do vary a lot. But most people land with me because they have way too many photos and they have them all over the shop. And I would say 7,500 a year is, from what I see from my clients, it would be maybe half of that number. So maybe Australians take fewer photos than Americans or possibly Europeans. I don't know. There are figures out there, but we can't really rely on them. We couldn't verify them. But and obviously it depends a lot on uh, how your life looks like. If you're someone who travels a lot, you tend obviously to take many more photos than other people who never do travel. And that has an influence too. It's not the only factor, but it can change numbers considerably. And but one trend I could see over the years when I look at collections of clients and my own too, by the way, um, we didn't take that many photos in 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, and every year it became more. So when I look back from now, what they have every year, the number does tend to become bigger each year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking from experience, that sort of, those numbers make sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that the thing that we are wanting to look at today is, I guess, the impact of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that this could be really helpful just to sort of look at the impact on the environment, the impact on our mental health with these types of increased number of photos or access to this many photos. And also on society, the social impacts. And so that's what we're going to have a look at today. And let's jump in. And I think the first thing we're going to talk about is the environmental impacts of this many photos and this sort of data that we're looking at. So do you want to share a little bit about what you've done some research into this, Chantal,
Yeah.
and how these types of things impact us, and then maybe what we can do?
Mm. Yes, that's the big question. What can we do about it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd like to start with one that comes up a lot. Everyone talks about the cloud. And so I'd like to talk a bit about energy use of those data centers because that's what the cloud really is. I keep saying when I do presentations, that let's not forget that cloud is not the cloud in the sky. It's simply a hard drive sitting somewhere away from your home. And that can be in a whole lot of different places all over the world. Um, which is a good thing. It's a convenience thing, but what we often forget is to think about the impacts that this has. So data centers are huge buildings, and within them they have a ton of servers. So there's it's incredibly big. Um, and servers, as you would probably know, even just your computer, it gets hot. They produce a lot of heat, and so they need cooling. And how are they cooled? There's different ways. We don't need to have to go too technical, but um, traditionally cooling something down requires a whole lot of energy. So where does that energy come from? Now, what they've started to do, for example, some of those data centers, they've started to build their centers in the Arctic because it's naturally cool. And then it takes less artificial cooling, less energy. However, of course, it still has an environmental impact. Um, and not all data centers are there. So when we start thinking about that, at first it thinks, oh, that sounds really good. Build them where it's naturally cool and we use less energy, and yeah, that's all good. But of course, yeah, it comes with challenges. It can disrupt local, habitats, wildlife. They have, as I said, they're huge buildings. They need access roads. They need still power lines, even if they try to use more sustainable energy and renewable energy, and they do. They advertise with that too, and which is a good thing. But they still often need like things like diesel and other power sources to run. Um, it could be that they pollute water because all those cooling efforts, it produces waste as well. So it goes somewhere, and sometimes it would go into local water sources. It influences local. aquatic wildlife. It influences indigenous communities sometimes. It changes their habits. If they build a data center in hunting grounds for indigenous communities, yeah, well, that's not great, is it? So, well, not in my view. This is my personal view. Of course, there is light and noise pollution. They're constantly running. They produce the noise. You know that from your computer. It not only gets hot, but sometimes you would hear the fan running. Now imagine that's a whole huge building full of them. Yeah, it's noisy and
Mm.
it can have an impact. So that's what we often forget. It's easy. Yeah, just upload to the cloud. But there's a whole lot behind that, and that's what we want to do today, just to raise that awareness, to have a think what that impact is, but also what can we do about it. So if I
Yeah.
want to minimize that energy usage for data centers, so what can I do? Um, I can do, or do you want to go with that, or should I?
You jump in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're doing a
All
great
right.
job.
So, first of all, we want to reduce the need for storage. What does that mean? Bring those numbers down.
Yeah.
Delete photos that you don't need or that you don't want. Why would you keep them? Get rid of them. Videos as well, they take up a lot of space. So bring those numbers down and save space. And that's not only photos, just as a side note, it's good practice and a good habit to maybe even just once a year go through your digital files, clean up a bit, delete stuff you don't need, delete old backup copies of things that you have since backed up 20 times. You don't need backups from like 10 years ago. Um, so be mindful and clean up as much as you can. And then when you choose a cloud provider, you might want to do some research first rather than jumping to the first best that comes up. um, and see what their companies stand for. What do they use? Where are their data centers? And yeah, just do some research to find a company that aligns with your values and that you want to support. And then thirdly, another thing that you could do in terms of photos, we know that a lot of people have turned on automatic upload of their photos to, iCloud, to Google Photos, to Dropbox. They have those camera upload options. And when you turn them on, in most cases, not in all apps, but mostly, they are uploaded automatically as you take the photo. Now you can stop that. You can still upload them, but you could do it manually and hence only upload what you really want and need in that cloud, also to save space. Not every screenshot will have to go into that place. So maybe that's another idea where you could sort of try to minimize that footprint a bit. Hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. I think that's great.
Mm.
It definitely makes a difference. And I think that's the thing today is, when we talk about sustainability, it's just being aware of all these options. And for some people, this is a really, really important part of their daily living to be aware of the impact on this current, generation and future generations. And so what can they do?
Mm.
There's some great tips. So the other part of the environment, Chantel, that you were talking about is e-waste generated by the digital storage devices. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as you said, we have all those devices to store not only to store our photos on, but to take them with in the first place. And every piece of hardware, if we want to call it like that as an overall, name, hardware will have to be replaced eventually. Everything breaks eventually. It's not going to be here forever. So and again, this is not only phones and servers. We're talking about camera cards. We're talking about charging cords, adapters. USB sticks, external drives that and we do recommend those things. It's not like you shouldn't use it, but I'll share a few tips in a moment what we can do about that. And also, we should keep in mind that not all of that stuff, that hardware is not every single piece is recyclable. A lot has become recyclable in the meantime, but not everything is. And sometimes it, simply lands in landfill and it might be releasing toxic stuff into the ground, and it can have a negative impact, obviously, not just on the environment and the wildlife, but humans eventually, if it goes into groundwater and things like that, contaminated soil. We don't want that, So, and also those resources that are used to make these things, I'm particularly thinking about batteries. Oftentimes they are mined in absolutely horrible, horrible conditions. And yeah, that's another thing to think about. Do we want to support that? And it's not like let's just turn the clock back 200 years, but we can obviously use these things. There's often no way around it anymore, really. They have become part of our lives, our everyday lives in modern society. So, but yeah, what can we do to maybe minimize that impact in terms of e-waste?
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely.
So, what I would suggest is, as with anything, not just, photo related, um, use it as long as possible. Um, why do we need a new phone every year? When the updated version comes out? Hmm. And I know not everyone does that, of course not, but there are a lot of people who change their devices as soon as the new one's out. So maybe, that's not necessary. Use them as long as possible. You might even consider buying secondhand or refurbished, especially in the phone world. If your kid needs an iPhone or a smartphone, the first time around, it might not need the latest and greatest, the most expensive. So why not, get a pre-used one that is not only cheaper, but it's also good for the environment,
Yeah,
give it a
yeah,
longer life. And of course, if you do need to get rid of things, which you will have eventually, we all have to, but we can recycle responsibly. So a lot of companies these days, they actually have programs where you can go back to the shop and bring it all back and they will recycle it professionally. Or at least here in Australia, I know that community, like council and communities, they have like collection points where you can drop off your e-waste and other stuff too. But e-waste has become quite popular and pretty much in every community these days. In Australia, I can't talk for others, but yeah. And again, it goes back to what I said before, bring those numbers down. The fewer photos you need to store, the less e-waste you will have eventually as well. And that brings us also, think back to our golden rules. Like, for example, golden rule number one, backing up. Yes, please do back up. We really, really encourage you to do that. But use the 3-2-1 method. You don't need 10 copies. So again, you don't need 10 external drives. You'll get away with a lot less. So, and create that hub. Golden rule number three, that is, when you have everything in one place, it's the same thing. You will need fewer resources, and hence eventually you'll have minimized your waste. Yeah.
absolutely. That's a huge thing. And
Mm.
and you know, we're not necessarily saying take less photos here. We're really looking at and encouraging that option of the hub will save a huge amount of ongoing digital usage if you've got the one
Mm,
place for all of those photos, and then you've cleared out. So when you are doing a backup, it's of one copy of everything, not a backup of 10 copies of everything,
yes.
and so that just alone is, it can really make an impact.
Mm. Yeah,
So
not only on physical things and environmental. We'll talk about other impacts in a moment.
mm,
Um, as a last sort of, um, um, no, sorry, lost it. But as a last topic of the environmental impacts, we
yep.
wanted to talk about the carbon footprint when you actually still print photos,
Mm,
because we have digital photos, but a lot of people print out at least some of those digital photos or print photo books, so that counts as the same thing basically. And it's the same thing. It obviously has an environmental impact because printing uses resources like paper, and paper uses usually a lot of water to be produced. Ink production uses a lot of water and energy. And to print a book or a photo, you need other materials too. Plus, you need, a whole manufacturing place, like a building. So again, it uses up resources. And with having anything printed, what I find always comes into play as well is the shipping. So it can be an issue because, and I'm speaking for the Australian market here. Yes, we are a big country, but we don't have actually that, the population is not that huge. So a lot of companies, we do have printing companies, but a lot of them actually print offshore. So that has an influence on the whole shipping issue. They're flying half around the world to be delivered to us. And even if we stay within Australia, it can be a problem because it's such a huge place. I can fly for 5 hours and I'm still in Australia. And people who live like in America or Canada, they will know that. It's massive. But it's like traveling from southern Spain to Scandinavia. So that it's got an impact. So how can we, minimize that and bring that down a bit? So again, go back to golden rule number two, know your why. Think about why are you doing this? Not every photo needs to be printed. Not every photo needs to be in a photo book. Um, and maxed out, okay, if the book company gives me 200 pages in a book, I need to max it out and print 200 pages. You can still, bring those numbers down a bit, possibly. Yeah. And as I just touched on before, we would invite people to try and shop local.
mm,
See who your local printers are. Um, do some research, find green printers, if we can call them that. But they would, when you go onto printers' websites, you might find information along those lines about sustainability, about carbon neutral printing. And so you might find someone who aligns with your values and go with them and try them out. And also, lastly, um, make sure that if you do print, that they do last. You know,
mm, mm,
use materials that will last. Use archive them properly. If you, let's say, you print out books or photos and then make a scrapbook or put them into slip-in albums, make sure that you use archival albums that will, stay beautiful and not damage your photos over time, but that there is that longevity, and there are materials like that, obviously. So yeah, quality is definitely a big one here. Go for better quality, and then you have that sustainability sorted.
yeah. Absolutely.
Mm.
Wonderful. Thank you. So that's a great summary of the impacts on the environment that we're talking about here with our photos. And so now jumping into the other area that we were looking at, which is the mental health side of things and the sustainability impacts of these of our photos from our mental health perspective and what we can do about that.
Mm.
So the types of things that we're looking at in this area really revolve around the cognitive load of having photos, and one of the things that is important for us to be aware of is like a decision fatigue that can happen when we've got this redundancy of copies. And so we know that we've got copies, we know that they're all spread out somewhere, maybe they're not organized. And these kinds of decisions that we are making constantly can make it harder to then even organize or recall and even make meaning for our photos. So when we have this sort of unresolved organized structure, it's or disorganized structure, but when it's not in a we haven't gone through maybe the golden rules that we've been talking about. What our brain can do, it's actually called the Zeigarnik effect, and it's amazing where our brain actively tends to remember unfinished or interrupted tasks.
Right.
So even better than completed tasks. So what that means is when we know we haven't completed that, it's not organized yet, we don't quite know where things are, our brain is really continuing to work in the background, and that then can lead to quite a lot of unconscious sort of stress that can put on us. So this Zeigarnik effect it's interesting. It was actually discovered through a psychologist, and this was when, say, wait staff have orders at a restaurant and they've got open orders and they haven't paid yet, and they were more likely to remember and retain those orders, knowing that sort of hadn't been ticked off yet, it hadn't been completed. But as soon as they'd paid and as soon as that was done, then their mind and they were able to release that the
Amazing.
mental load. It's amazing. It's the same kind of thing when you're thinking
Mm.
about you're studying for a test or something and you're retaining all this information. Kids do their rote learning of different things, and then we take the test, and it's just like I can't even remember that. I can't. It's how did I know that? How did I learn that? And so our mind, our brain can actually release that when we know that there's this completion, but we hold on to it when it's not yet complete or it's been interrupted. And that's what happens when we're organizing our photos and we're meaning to organize our photos. We know that difference when in our mind we have been able to do that and finish the task. And we know that, it is a releasing of that, just the holding of the information, really,
Mm.
that mental load. So that's something that just to be aware of. What we can do with that is, ultimately continue to go through our process of organizing our photos, following those golden rules or whatever method it is that works for you. And that can help to relieve that that cognitive load on us. So that's our tip on that one. The other thing to be aware of with in the mental health space around our photos is if we've got this ability to sort of think through, oh, I've got all this digital storage available to me now. We've got, I can just upgrade my service to, I haven't organized them yet, or I haven't gone through this deletion process and stuff like that. So I'll just get some more storage and I'll do it later. I will get to it. And so this sort of delayed process, it also has an impact on this meaning making. We're delaying the opportunity to engage with our photos in an emotional way that we can then reflect back on them. And so this, this delayed meaning making can happen, which can also bring on stress. It can have, a burden of overwhelm, and stress can lead to, an anxiety and depression and a range of different things. So, if that's what you're doing in this space, that's something to be aware of, that could bring some relief in just um, understanding what your process is going to be, even if you haven't done it yet. But a plan can really relieve some of that stress.
Mm.
And then also, um, we're not processing those memories and those emotions. So that can really lead to some grief, and some even some overwhelm, and some disappointment with ourselves. And so then that pressure, that self pressure that we put on ourselves, and and that has a huge impact as well. Guilt and things like that. So we, to avoid that, I think, having a structure and a system to clear out and have things in one place can be so meaningful to so many areas of our life, the environment, and then in this area also with our mental health. So that's, so creating a hub, our golden rule number 3, and that can really make an impact on these kinds of things,
Mm.
rather than the "I'll sort it out later" sort of mindset, and this incomplete,
Yeah, because it always lingers in the back of your mind if it's never done. It's
yeah.
like a mental load thing, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really does, bring relief when we're able to, even just the step of, going through our golden rule where we have a backup that can take care of this weight on our shoulders about even, not knowing if my photos are safe.
Hmm.
And so then also when we're knowing our why, and we can go through these next stages of them being able to, have everything in one place with a hub, then it allows our mind. It's almost like we don't have to consciously say this to ourselves. Oh, mind, you can let that go now. But our mind does. It's like the order's been paid, or like
Yes,
it
yes.
really does allow us to say, well, at least I've got a plan in place, and we need to honor our commitments to ourselves and see that through. But it really can relieve some stress knowing that we are doing something about it.
Mm.
Yeah.
This is
Um,
really interesting. Yes. Yeah.
yeah, it
Uh,
really is. It really is. And I think it's we can underestimate the impact of this. And we're only talking about our photos, and digital and printed photos.
mhm.
But this is, relevant in all different areas of our life. But yeah, definitely when it comes to our photos, from a sustainable point of view, of when we do start to take action and not have the, oh, I can upgrade my plan to get more storage, or, oh, it's all on my phone. And these sort of statements that we make to ourselves to almost justify our decisions,
Yes.
they can be temporarily relieving mentally for us. But, we're really here to encourage and consider these longer term impacts from a sustainable point of view.
Mm.
Yeah. And then lastly, the issues that we have and the types of things to be aware of in a the social space from our sustainability socially. And the things like this, which is really interesting to look at from our photos, is, when we look at photos, they're inherently social. There's more than one person perhaps in the photo. We've got a group, we've got family photos, things like this. So sometimes what can happen is the boundaries of almost ownership of that photo can be blurred, and privacy, ownership and privacy can be blurred, where I'm in that photo but you took the photo, so it's sort of like I have some kind of an ownership of that photo as well. When we're sharing photos, and we're looking at, say, the usage of, data storage centers. That one photo may live in 20 people's photo
Mm.
hubs, and all of the ongoing resources that are required then to, say, maintain that, from a social perspective. So we can look at, say, if you are the photo keeper of the family, this is something where you can take some conscious decisions around who that might be. So you may share, a smaller resolution of that photo, but you maintain the high resolution. So it's just making some conscious decisions really around that and the impacts that might have. Um, the other thing I wanted to mention is that photos, it's this interesting sort of polarity where photos may seem almost this ephemeral, have this ephemeral sort of a feeling, this fragility, almost like this urgency that they could be lost,
Mm.
um, while also having this sort of permanency around, um, you know, where are my photos? There's this digital footprint that could be, one photo that was taken and it could resurface sort of, decades later.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we forget about these
Mm.
photos that are out there. And so there's this almost like we don't quite know where our photos are out in the world. And so socially, that can really mean that we have almost we kind of can give up our right to thinking about this. We've shared it, or somebody else might have it, or else I don't trust where my photos are. So I think it's just something to consider where you stand with that, with your own photos.
Mm.
And we can take some practical steps to be then more aware of where they are. So we don't
Yeah.
feel like we're sort of holding on to
Mm.
this, the fragility of this, where we can take some deliberate steps, obviously, with the even golden rule number one, with our own backup. So we know where our photos are. We know that we can take a backup, have a 3, 2, 1, you've got 3 copies of a backup, 2 different types of devices, and one of them is kept off-site from us. So maybe in a cloud storage or at a different location. But at least we know where that is. So that can sort of remove some of that feeling of this uncertainty around this social area of where are my photos and things like that. Lastly, I just wanted to talk about the social impact of photos from an intergenerational point of view, even on our storytelling and the traditions that have been in place and that are really changing socially around our photos, and just again around us being able to take some ownership for that and some deliberate decisions around what we want to instill and um, maintain for generations. I know, even in Indigenous environments, how, we're talking about maybe art and artifacts and things like that, and the storylines that come. And even, we may remember ourselves, I do around our family albums and the joy that we would have around storytelling in our photos and that social opportunity for connectedness.
Yeah.
Is really important for our mental health, and for a whole range of different things. And photos can be such a pivotal part around that. So when we look at the sustainability of that, we can continue to have rituals. They may change. We may have digital photos. We have a frame. We can talk about our photos and things like that. So the rituals may change as our culture changes in this space. Um, but our social connection to sustain these memory making opportunities socially can maintain. And that's a really important part to consider and be intentional about. So I think that's a really important thing for us to consider when we're talking about the sustainability of our memories, our digital photos, both
Mm.
printed and digital, with the environment, with our mental health personally, and with our society at large. And yeah, I really hope that this has been an opportunity for us to just sort of raise a bit of awareness for you, as you're considering this. Maybe you're considering the sustainability issues in your own life in other areas. And we can include the photos within that really important discussion.
Mm.
So yeah, so I think we would love to be able to just sort of share this content. I think, Chantel, we were talking before, um, so when we sort of wrap up, I think you were saying size does matter, yeah.
It does. Yes. So, yeah, we really encourage you to, in any case, not just because of sustainability, in any case, to delete unnecessary and unwanted photos and videos, just to bring those numbers down. There are so many reasons to do that. But today we're talking about that sustainability aspect, and that would be a big part of it, I think. Because also, um, someone once told me that, in the digital world, even though it's digital. Oh my God, I can't talk. Even though it's digital and we can't touch it, it's not tangible. It is still real estate,
Mm.
and real estate is expensive. It's space. And, the cloud and digital storage is real estate. It takes up space, and it still does take up physical space. Remember those data centers in the Arctic and wherever. It takes up space and it costs a lot of not just money for them and for us. We pay we pay for it in different ways too, and that's what it was all about today, to just raise
Yeah.
that bit of the
And
voice.
it takes up mental space. That's exactly
It
right.
does. Oh,
Physical space.
absolutely. And I can so relate to that when you were talking about, the mental health aspect and also the social. I'm fascinated by the social aspects. I, for one, will definitely, that gives me food for thought. I'd like to look a bit more into that. I find it really, really interesting, especially the storytelling part, over generations and how that changes.
Yeah.
Very fascinating. So, yeah, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, we just would like to invite you and encourage you to really be intentional. Even, it starts when you take the photo. Know you why. Why do you take that photo? Do you really need it? And even though you might take it, I do that quite a bit actually. I take it with the purpose of sharing it. A very, very, simple example would be my morning walks, and I often see kangaroos. So I take a photo, I put it in my WhatsApp status. I do that for my friends and family back home in Switzerland because who doesn't love a kangaroo, right? Cute. And they're wild, So I shared it, but then I usually delete the photo. I don't need to keep them all. It
Mm,
has done its purpose, it's fulfilled it, and it can go. So, again, I have the think about the intention
mm.
behind a photo, and not just when taking, but obviously also then when organizing and managing them. Yeah.
Good. Wonderful. Well, thank you. That's been so, yeah, it's been lovely to chat about this topic.
Yeah.
And to our listeners, we hope this has been something that's given you some, raised some awareness, helped you make some decisions to think through, and also some actions that you can take for yourself. So thanks so much for listening. We would love to hear from you. If you can share something, either send us an email or through our socials. Let us know maybe what you are doing yourself for you and your family around this topic with sustainability in this space of your printed and your digital photos. Um, and maybe that might give some ideas to someone else in the future that could help them. So just yeah, working together for our future generations. So thanks again, and we will look forward to talking to you soon. I am Fiona from Counselling Memories.
And I am Chantal from Photos in Order. Thank you so much for tuning in, and happy photo organizing.